punulan saat dominison kya dumatavoy. Na tavoy po, getong pinaiki, ngango son sa kya kay 10
In the heart of Kampung Nampasan lives my grandmother, whom we lovingly call Dodu. Her name is Rosina Sogondu, but here in our village, she's simply known as Ongut. At 87 years old, she carries a treasure trove of memories from a time when life was simpler and every day was woven with traditions and purpose.
Zon po nga, mimang da ti no kampung na pasanda no susu. Susu zo do 19 hari bulan 1 da tahun 37. Dati no guminazo kampung na Nampasan.
Growing up in a close-knit community, Dodu learned the rhythms of village life, shaped by family values and a deep connection to the land. Her days often began with a task that required patience, respect, and an understanding of nature. Caring for the buffaloes.
Pinggagazo sakay na po nga ay so nasubay da kaladya panuan mo hoing dong subab may pokotap kalabaw. Mugongoy nga sakot panmad kalabaw.
For Dodu, caring for the buffaloes was more than a chore. It was a responsibility handed down by her father. The buffaloes weren't just animals. They were partners in labor, integral to the village's way of life.
Mga na po ko sa ikalabaw nga vinga. Odo mo ni kalabaw. Asanang kano mga gakob. Kalabaw no pangagazat na gaya di sulvon. Guwas po numado bogok pangaganda na pay mongomot nga kalabaw no pakazon na gaya. Kuni kalati bago ikalabaw no izyaw mamihaw daw. Tau no ko kalabaw to angan nang ano manihan osin. Dadi mamihaw sa kayo no pwede nga. Si ka. Tusi kam. Kongo ikalabaw tuminong.
This knowledge, passed by her father, was a skill honed over time. The buffaloes carried firewood, helped harvest paddy, and symbolized the steady rhythm of life in Kampung Nampasan.
Nga kalabaw na ba no? Aw di aw paduli. Aw di atamangan aw di panday aw di kalati do. Onu migari Koubasanan ni guluy. Kalabaw no panigada ba no kokoton no ay so di akaladya.
Dodu's voice carries the weight of this loss. For her, these traditions are not just memories, but essential knowledge that, if shared, could keep the spirit of Kampung Nampasan alive.
Dadi nung tupiumanan no? Habasi nang kunong itayhan pinabagi mo di, kaya nga vio kamuhakan.
Kasi da aw da sa daan nung abuli da paghuyon nga abasito mo dai.
The past, as Dodu sees it, is filled with lessons for today's generation. Lessons in patience, responsibility, and reverence for the natural world. These are teachings that live on, so long as there is someone willing to listen. Beyond caring for the buffaloes, Dodu speaks passionately about the values of cooperation and communal work. These, she believes, are the foundation of a strong and united community.
Abasin padara patungkusan na tanak na bay no nga kiba dara koisaan na po di paghuhuy guys ikaw ikon. Kiba na po ano na po ikaladya nga magihom imagitatanod tumanod kamay gyadi kon.
In those days, every community task was done together. Dodu describes how the spirit of communal work united the village, creating bonds of trust and interdependence.
Dadi ano na pa diyaw mangan nga po yun ikawanam koykot nga video gakay makitanod ko. Song yan bago do kiba o kaladyan niya sandi ano no pom hobo no magtatanod ram oiso bago ginapo mo ngay sabab nakongoy ka na di gahid kon.
For Dodu, cooperation wasn't just about completing tasks, it was about building relationships. She hopes the younger generation, especially Kadazan youth, can embrace these values to strengthen their communities.
Inada o mangan to ko magitatanod ano no padai kala jadi avasing magihoy ho adada kibada kay ano geti magiga o magigagagot ka aw avasidai mang sadadi magitutunod walau patudo magsusuway patay inaw ka di bangsa.
Dodu's memories of unity extend beyond Kampung Nampasan. She recalls how the Sama people who lived near the sea would bring fresh fish to the village, exchanging it for rice.
Magtutunod na po sebab ingkas kay na di guloi migatyatun sama ka ingka nga magitutunod di kay ko to pa jeho magawit sa datu jeho gyapon nong dat kay ko to pati do takawam ahanan na gay da pay.
Her message is clear. Community strength comes from unity and mutual support. This is a legacy that must endure even as times change.
From Dodu's heartfelt reflections, we turn to the perspective of indigenous urban youth, whose experiences paint a vivid picture of how indigenous knowledge is passed down, or sometimes left behind, in today's rapidly changing world.
My name is Ethan. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Penampang, Sabah. I'm a Kadazan. Growing up, I've always spent a lot of time with my grandparents. They've always been educating me passionately about our culture, Kadazan. And I also myself, when I was growing up, I find myself reading books provided by my own grandparents that talk about our culture.
I'm Terry. I'm 20 years old. I'm from Putatan, Sabah. My race is Kadazan Dusun. For the language, I generally obtain them from either listening to my relatives or my parents speak, and also during my secondary school, they offer Kadazan Dusun subject. And as for their traditions or how they live, I usually get stories occasionally told to me by my grandparents or my mother.
But not all youth have had this connection. Natalie shared how a lack of guidance from parents or formal education left gaps in her understanding of her culture.
Saya tidak menerima sebarang pendidikan orang asal. Pertama sekali, saya tidak dibimbing oleh kedua orang ibu bapa saya dan juga saya tidak menerima pendidikan seperti ini di sekolah saya.
Despite their varied experiences, all agreed on one thing: the importance of indigenous knowledge for today's youth.
I am Elston Adrian. I am a Kadazan. Our culture is what unites us. Culture is like a driving force in unity, so I would say that without knowing our own culture, it would lead to more divide, especially among the youths. I would say that unity is probably why we need to understand our own culture.
In your opinion, what are the pros of indigenous people's practices and knowledge to the youth?
Practices of indigenous people, those are things that have been passed down since centuries. So to form those practices, it took a lot of experience. And when it comes to passing it down to the youths, I guess they'll be able to learn things where they can make the least mistakes and also give them more understanding about the tradition. One of the practices is Tanggal Sungai. The point is to control the population of fish in the rivers.
The youth also noted the risk of neglecting these traditions. Alston observed how many young people today cannot perform basic cultural dances or rituals. Ethan highlighted the impact of technology, saying,
Most youths now, I guess they're like mostly unaware of the tradition because it's the age of technological devices. They tend to abandon the traditional practices, and I can see it in myself as well.
When asked if they would join cultural programs, responses were mixed. Some expressed enthusiasm to learn more about their language and traditions, while others were cautious, citing unengaging formats.
Maksud saya program yang tidak menarik itu adalah terlalu banyak sesi seperti ceramah berbanding dengan interaksi antara belia.
Said Natalie. They also voiced concerns about the lack of accessible programs.
Honestly, throughout my entire life of living in Sabah, I have never heard of any workshops related to our culture. But that's from me.
I haven't heard a lot about these workshops myself, even though I spend a lot of time in social media. So I've never participated in any of these.
I would love to join them. I'd like to learn something new about them, and also maybe learn how to speak their language or apply some of their knowledge in real life.
Pada pendapat pribadi saya tidak, sebab saya rasa sudah terlambat untuk saya belajar benda seperti ini.
For this youth, preserving indigenous knowledge isn't just about remembering the past. It's about building a future rooted in identity, unity, and resilience.
Before this, I was never aware of the importance of our own culture until I started studying abroad. Being in a foreign land, I start to realize how far I actually am from my own culture, from my own practices, from my own traditions and all. But I'm also lucky to have friends who are of the same or somewhat similar cultures, and that led me to realize the importance of learning about our own culture, especially to those who would be furthering their studies away from Sabah or Sarawak. Look for friends who are of similar cultures and learn from or with them, because you never know, one day when you come back to your own hometown, you'll start to realize how deeply connected you are to your environment.
I strongly believe that us as indigenous people, we should play our parts and actively put in efforts to try and spread the word or make activities, raise awareness in other people, just to prevent our culture and tradition from going extinct.
Building upon the wisdom of Dodu and the reflections of the urban youth, we journey further to hear from those who straddle the line between the traditional and modern worlds. One such voice is Jikanil, a youth from Kampung Nampasan, a village steeped in heritage and natural beauty. For Jikanil, growing up in Kampung Nampasan meant being immersed in the traditions and practices passed down through generations. These were not just stories, they were practical lessons for living harmoniously with nature and respecting its cycles.
Masa kamu membesar, apa amalan-amalan tradisi yang kamu amalkan?
Selama saya membesar di Kampung Terian, pantang larang yang saya tahu salah satunya adalah di sungai lah. Masa pergi sungai, kalau kami pergi tangkap ikan, mesti tidak boleh selalu, tidak boleh setiap hari. Nah, begitulah.
Kamu ada macam countermeasures kah supaya tidak habis pupus semua tu ikan-ikan di sungai?
Ada macam kalau ikan yang masih kecil, biasanya kami tidak ambil lah. Kami kasih biar saja.
Simple yet profound. This practice reflects a philosophy of conservation that has been part of indigenous communities for centuries, a philosophy that modern sustainability movements could learn from. Beyond his own village, Jikanil emphasized the value of understanding and respecting the traditions of other communities.
Kamu rasa pentingkah orang tahu mengenai benda yang kau belajar masa membesar?
Penting juga, sebab lain kali kalau kamu masuk kampung begitu, kamu tahu sudah kan tentang larang dia. Kita di sini kan banyak kampung, jadi lain kali bila kamu masuk kampung orang lain, memang ada pantang larang dia. Jadi kau perlu tahu lah.
But what happens when these traditions and taboos are ignored? For Jikanil, the consequences are subtle yet impactful.
Biasanya apa yang terjadi, mungkin ada yang jatuh sakit begitu, kita tidak tahu lah.
Whether rooted in belief or coincidence, these outcomes serve as reminders of the importance of living in harmony with long-standing customs. His reflections echo the sentiments of others, the need to bridge the gap between past and present, ensuring that indigenous knowledge remains relevant and accessible. In a time where rapid urbanization and technology often pull us away from our roots, voices like Dodu's and Jikanil's remind us of the wisdom embedded in our heritage.
From the reflections of Dodu, Jikanil, and the urban youth, it's clear that indigenous knowledge is more than a link to the past. It's a guide for navigating the future. To build this bridge, education plays a critical role. One such voice championing this connection is my aunt, Rita Lasimbang, a leader who envisions the way to integrate indigenous knowledge into both formal and informal learning systems.
My mom and dad, Kadazan. So how did we learn Kadazan? Yeah, because at home we use the mother tongue, Kadazan. So everything from birth till when we're growing up, all in Kadazan.
For Rita, the village was a classroom. Lessons in rice farming, collecting food from the environment, and using traditional herbs were all intertwined with the language and culture.
What did we learn growing up? From rice farming, especially, and then collecting food, edibles from the environment, going out to look for food like frogs, magium bonong, may paki bonong, and then magapon, manizud, everything, how to do it, and the language, the culture that goes with it, everything in the mother tongue.
But Rita also recognizes how modern life has pulled families away from these practices. As urbanization takes hold, many traditions are left behind, and the time to pass down this knowledge diminishes.
The Kadazan these days, they don't do rice farming. So you all miss out on that one. Like for us, we like rice farming, we learn all this, every single step. Like we start with mangansa, then mangihik the tatakan. Then after that, monotok. And in the monotok, there's the manumpos, mangasok, mamahabun. And when the rice seedling called tatok grows up, we'll have the time to memutus. And then after that, mengintakas, memohonggos. But while the one is being taken care of, then you go to preparation of the rice fields. That one, first you go mamabat, maminatang, that is repairing the rice buns. Then after that, you put water in the rice fields, and then you start with mamaladu, then lumagus. That's to break the soil. After you plowed, after you mamaladu, then you manud, another rake to level the ground. And after menginsakot to clear all the weeds. After that, baru mananom, you transplant the rice. So imagine how much of just rice planting, how much database we have already. And you talk about our mom, tell us how to identify the plants for what, and then how to prepare. So that's why we know. That's the indigenous education. And if like the rice farming, you learn with your parents, siblings, neighbors, and community.
This shift has created a disconnect, leaving younger generations with fewer opportunities to learn about their heritage. Despite the challenges, Rita sees potential in adapting indigenous knowledge to fit today's formal education systems. She believes that formal education can serve as a gateway, inspiring curiosity and encouraging youth to seek deeper connections to their roots.
We don't no longer live in the community or that kind of livelihood. Rice farming, for instance, we don't do anymore. So how do we learn that in the formal education? Since formal education means learning in the school, the curriculum in the school must integrate this aspect of the indigenous cultures. Not everything, because it's not easy to do that anymore. Everything like us when we were growing up, because our classroom is the whole environment. But you guys, this time, it's not possible to do the 100%. But at least maybe a bit of percent.
For Rita, indigenous education is not just about preserving knowledge. It's about fostering a complete sense of identity.
Indigenous knowledge, that is an advantage for the youths because it'll make you, well, I would say, a more wholesome person, because the ones you learn in school is very limited. For instance, if I ask you, what's your music? And you as an indigenous person, you cannot be saying the guitar, isn't it? Or the drum. Yeah, you must say, oh, I have sompoton, tagong, kulintangan, sundatang, bungkaw. That makes you who you are, indigenous person. You must go to your own culture. So that's the advantage of indigenous education for the indigenous person.
Rita envisions creative ways to reintroduce indigenous practices, blending tradition with modern formats.
So I have advice would be like through a cultural camp, where that cultural camp we introduce programs like what we used to do, like may pakisoko, looking for bamboo shoots. So we can do that. Last time when we were growing up, may pagyum no kinatuan, may pakihombiding, may pakipakis. So you can also introduce that in a setting, in a place where you have all this available. May pagapon. Maybe you guys never seen a hook how to use earthworms. How do you do that? So you have this kind of camps where you expose indigenous children to their rights. Actually, if children don't get to eat bambangan, their indigenous food, because parents say, oh, aw na di tagali na pa nga, ala, at no good. No, you're actually depriving them. So, opo to, kani bambangan? So, therefore, you must give them that experience. That is their right to test.
From Dodu's memories of unity to the youth grappling with their place in a modern world, to Rita's vision for bridging past and future, one message shines through. Indigenous knowledge is a shared legacy, one that thrives when passed from one generation to the next. It's not just history, it's a guide for living sustainably, understanding who we are, and staying connected to the land and each other. As we look to the future, the call is clear. Learn, share, preserve. By carrying forward the wisdom of our ancestors, we ensure that these traditions remain alive, not just as memories, but as vibrant, living parts of who we are. Kopivosian, I'm Crystal.
And I'm Job. This story was created during the Media Fellowship Workshop titled Community Journalism Through Audio Storytelling, organized by the Media Unit at Pacos Trust, a community-based and indigenous-led non-profit organization. Our friends Annette and Kennedy also worked on this story.
We would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to Pacos Trust for organizing this workshop and to the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, Open Society Foundations, and East-West Management Institute for their invaluable support and guidance for the Media Fellowship 2024. Thank you for listening.